message is transmitted at the request of local authorities. At 9:47 a.m. Mountain Time, a disaster of unknown type has occurred at the Black Mesa Research Facility.
In 2003, Valve released Half-Life Source. This was a remake of the original game with added ragdoll physics and a side order of jank. When asked about the potential for a ground-up remake of Half-Life, Gabe Newell kinda said that it was the fans' responsibility, not theirs. So a few fans got together, and in 2004, Black Mesa Source was announced. 15 years later, and it's not even finished. We're like at 85%, not complete. Black Mesa is a fan remake of Half-Life that aims to bring the game's aesthetic up to the standards of modern shooters while keeping the underlying game design intact. Ground-up fan remakes are kind of like colorizing film, in that it usually looks awful and the people who own the distribution rights to Citizen Kane usually get pissed, I think. But Black Mesa is thus far the biggest exception, and I'll be right there with them. The game looks gorgeous. The offices of Black Mesa are expertly designed to look cutting edge and sleek. The use of volumetric lighting and reflections is just fantastic, paired with a gorgeous soundtrack from Joel Nielsen that combines the original game's ambient music with a newer, louder, guitar-heavy sound. Watching the destruction of Black Mesa courtesy of the Resonance Cascade is absolutely heart-wrenchingly beautiful, and positively harrowing yet hauntingly charming. Half-Life never instilled this much fear, confusion, and heartbreak in me, so feeling just as scared and alone as someone rightfully would feel in this situation was... I just don't have words for it. No matter what else, Black Mesa has struck a chord with its aesthetic, and the end result is one of the most gripping gaming experiences I've had in years. This is something truly special from people who truly care about Half-Life. Alright, there we are. I've met my Black Mesa gushing quota. Not that that wasn't, legit. I truly feel that. But the art direction and sound design is stunning. But the gameplay, yeah, that's Half-Life. A slightly more jank, dumbed-down version of Half-Life. The impressive AI from the 1998 game is absent. It's mostly repurposing the AI from the 2004 game, Half-Life 2, with a little bit of bits and pieces from the original. What I mean is, bull squids no longer stalk the map looking for a meal. You can't distract them with the hanging beef and office complex. Hound eyes no longer have colored indicators to tell you how strong their group is, so I don't even know if they group up. And the HECU Marines have gone from speaking piecemeal words in order to provide a more precise info on the fly, to having canned lines that, while easier to understand, are much less interesting. You'll hear them repeat themselves so many times. Fox still speaks one word at a time, and the speak console command can be used to input funny sentences. Kind of. It doesn't actually work all that well due to the limited vocabulary, but the spirit's still there. Quality of life changes from the original have vanished. It seems that the dynamic wall textures from the original are gone. See, walls used to be made out of a base layer with different decals that would be put over top, and when you reload, those pieces would be reloaded, so you'd have a new wall texture. And this made things feel more interesting and more dynamic. That's not in Black Mesa. But these are kind of small changes. 90% of the people are not going to notice them unless you did your digging like I did and found out how Half-Life 1's AI worked in the first place, or you take the time to experiment with the stuff for hours and hours. You're not going to notice much of this stuff. I only noticed it because I'm stupid and I'm a nerd. Rather, I think you're probably going to notice the more glaring changes are to the level design. On a Rail is cut in half, and many of the chapters have their events shuffled around, or puzzles have totally new solutions that often feel kind of pointless. The Akira lift in the original now involves you having to climb into a duct to get to a security room and activate the tram instead of just pulling a lever. The laser shield in questionable ethics is not solved by putting barrels in its way, even though there's barrels right next to it, but just by simply unplugging the shield while it's raised and starting the laser. Not all of these changes are bad though. Things like the ammo cache and surface tension are now guarded by a security guard inside of an office lined with bulletproof glass. You no longer have to worry about him dying to a Marine if you're too slow, though you can still accidentally kill him yourself, and the sniper and the minefield combo in that same chapter is truncated quite nicely. I could probably make a whole video about surface tension, honestly. It's on the whole easier, but individual parts are more difficult, if that makes sense. Part of this is helped by the abundance of health in HEV power stations. They're plentiful, and most HEV stations power the suit up to 76% on normal from nothing, which is fantastic. I went into surface tension with more health and rarely found myself having to repeat a segment over and over while at death's door. In an active equivalent exchange, though, the game's ammo caches have been sacrificed, save for the really big ones near the end. You have smaller reserves than you did in Half-Life 1, for instance being able to carry 15 total crossbow bolts, 18 total 357 Magnum rounds, and a total of 197 9mm bullets for the Glock and MP5. versus the 50 bolts, 36 magnum rounds, and 259mm rounds you could carry in the original game. This makes you feel much less like a tank, and you need to switch around your arsenal all the time. But the other side of this is that I ran out of ammo in most weapons a lot faster and had to resort to satchel charges, grenades, or the rocket launcher to fight enemies more often, which just feels wrong. It's a mixed bag of both good and bad. There's some steps in the right direction. On the whole, Black Mesa is more OSHA compliant, though they'd still definitely get a failing grade. But a lot of the new changes feel extraneous, like a dev just said, "I'm on board," and made an extra air vent for fun or something. The game is also much, much darker than the original Half-Life, like in terms of brightness. Having an infinite flashlight instead of the 60-second rechargeable one does solve the problem, though it's in the same way that loosely wrapping a slash wound in gauze would solve that problem. It's a temporary surface level fix, and it needs a bigger solution. A mixed bag is honestly a perfect way to sum up Black Mesa. The AI feels more rudimentary. I saw a lot more guys standing around and moving back and forth than I did in the original Half-Life. I feel like there are a lot more moments where I went, yeah, that's not good level design, but at the same time, there were a number of changes to the original that felt reasonable, perfectly acceptable, and in some ways completely outshine the original. Again, I cannot stress this enough. For the Source engine, Black Mesa is a gorgeous game, and while some places look way better than others, and Lambda Core paired with Bloom can sometimes make the game unreadable to a horrible degree, when you get to a part that's been polished over the better part of 15 years, it truly shines. Anytime a rocket engine starts up, you're in for a treat. And then you get to a part that's had one or two touches over the last decade and a half, like some of the less interesting parts between set pieces, and it just feels rather anemic. It feels like Half-Life Source all over again. For people who have trekked through Black Mesa in the original Half-Life or one of its many official ports, Black Mesa is a shallow but attractive recreation. For every moment where it feels open, alive, there's another that just feels empty and lifeless. If you're new to Half-Life though, this is a great update to the original. You have no basis, the rearranged puzzles are going to be seen by fresh eyes, and have more obvious solutions not bogged down by muscle memory. The health and armor caches make traversing the game with minimal bloodshed much easier, and it's still Half-Life at its very core. It's a solid game, just how solid it actually is will vary depending on who you are. Even at its very worst, it's still a somewhat naff version of Half-Life, which is an upgrade from the borderline unplayable Source Engine version. At least borderline unplayable these days. There's a lot of bugs that have been introduced and haven't been fixed, and Valve won't fix them. Though they fixed bugs in the original Half-Life, still. Whatever. Black Mesa is $20 on Steam, and it's currently Windows and Linux exclusive. The game also ends at Lambda Core with the final chapters in Zen, the Alien World, coming this summer. Black Mesa, from the opening cutscenes to Lambda Core, is about as long as the original Half-Life from opening to closing credits, and Zen is expected to include another roughly 6 hours of gameplay, so you're looking at about a 12 and 16 hour experience. I'd say it's worth it on sale. There's also like the mod version. I don't know if you can still get that. If you can, that's free. Go for it, I guess.
If you like this video and you'd like to see more, I'd recommend subscribing. Patreon and social media links are in the description.